Hey dudes, welcome to Splat from the Past, the only 80s themed horror and sci-fi show where things can get totally radical. Now today, it is such an honor because I will be interviewing a multi-talented lady, a pioneer in the fashion world, who's also an actress and a dancer, Marcia McBroom. You all know her from the 1970 cult classic Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. And I'm having her on today, my first guest for the 50th anniversary of that movie. She was also in Jesus Christ Superstar. She was in The Legend of Blank Charlie, Willie Dynamite, The Bingo, Long Traveling All-Stars, and Motor Kings. And she's had just quite a life. And it's going to be great to talk to her today. I just can't wait. I was lucky enough to get in contact with her via LinkedIn, and we are going to talk about all that stuff today. So, here is my interview with Marcia McBroom. Hey, Marcia, welcome to the show. How are you?
Fine, Tommy. How are you?
Oh, everything is great. I finally had my first cup of coffee after my interview earlier, and I'm ready to go now.
Okay. I know what it means to have that morning Joe.
Absolutely, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, going back in time, I know that you were a fashion model and that you have sisters who were in the music business. Were you always a ham growing up and you wanted to be artistic as well?
Believe it or not, no. I actually wanted to be a doctor when I was a child. But then I got into dancing, and I was playing the flute when I was in high school. And then the modeling thing just came about because a friend of mine said, I have somebody who's opening a modeling agency. Would you be interested? And then I got a cover right away in a magazine called Evergreen. And then that just started the whole cycle.
So you didn't do any like school plays or anything like that?
Well, I used to dance in school, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love to dance, so I used to dance in school, and then I ended up working with Catherine Dunham, who was a famous African-American choreographer, and she got me and one of my sisters in Aida at the Metropolitan Opera House, so we danced at the Old Met and the New Met at Lincoln Center, and that was quite exciting. And then she took me to Paris to dance in a musical comedy called Deux Anges sont venus. And I lived in Paris for 6 months. And surprisingly enough, I still remember some of my French that I learned while I was living in Paris. So everyone's always shocked when I start speaking French.
That's wonderful. At what age did the dancing start?
I'm not sure. I guess I was in elementary school because I had a dance teacher named Anne Garnett, and she was very into multiculturalism, so we would take lessons with her. And then I also took ballet lessons with some African-American twins known as the Facey twins. And what was so sad is that I was just about to get into toe, and then everyone started saying to me, why are you spending all this time with ballet? There's no future for African-American ballet dancers. So I bought my toe shoes and everything, but then I ended up getting drawn into more modern and ethnic dance.
So are you trained in all dancing overall?
Yeah, because we studied, I studied ballet, jazz, modern, and I used to go to different choreographers for lessons. I even danced with a troupe, a Haitian troupe, Constant Gentil, and he would take us up to Canada. We danced at the Queen Elizabeth Hotel in Montreal, in Montreal. So it's been very interesting, very interesting.
I can imagine. You're born and raised in New York?
Yes, all the way, raised in the Bronx, the boogie down Bronx, and that was always exciting. But then I did live in L.A. for a little bit while I was in high school because my parents got a divorce, and I finally went out to L.A. to live with my dad.
I thought so, because an accent as lovely as yours cannot be recent. It has to be many, many, many years of living in New York.
Oh, God, yes. And it's funny with New York because we even have different accents via boroughs. So there's like a Brooklyn accent, and then there's a Queens accent. So it's really funny. And then I used to do a lot of TV commercials, too, during my career. So you had to have like a very standard American accent to do most commercials.
Absolutely. So take me back again. So after high school, did you decide you were going to pursue modeling? Was it?
Well, let's say modeling decided to pursue me. Because it's funny, after high school, I actually got a scholarship to go to a Midwestern college because I wanted to go to, just throw myself into my work. As a matter of fact, I went to an all-girls high school, Walton High School, because I didn't want to be distracted with boys and all the nonsense that girls go through growing up. So I purposely went to an all-girls high school. But it was funny because my mom used to work at the United Nations, so she would take my sister and I with her when she'd get invited to different African countries for their independence celebrations. And she'd say, I have to go with my daughters. So we ended up getting out of school a lot because she would just sign us out of school and we'd go to Africa with her. So we went to a lot of different countries when I was growing up. And then my mom's family is from Montserrat, which is that tiny island in the Caribbean with the big volcano. And so from 3rd grade to 6th grade, we'd spend like 6 months in New York and then 6 months in Montserrat in a one-room schoolhouse situation. And so that was fascinating because she wanted us to get to meet my great-grandmother, who was like near 100 at that point.
Yeah.
That was invaluable because then I got to see so many different things in the world and just meet so many different people. And my family is quite active in the civil rights movement because my mom used to work for Dr. King, and she was even the secretary of the Rosenbergs, the famous Rosenbergs who got executed.
Yeah.
And Stokely Carmichael actually was one of my cousins. And we had another cousin from Guyana who wrote a famous book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, and his name was Walter Rodney. And he, again, very progressive, but I heard he got assassinated. So our lives were like always meeting all kinds of heads of state and diplomats. And I even got to meet Patrice Lumumba, of all people, when I was a little girl. So it was like a very interesting life of always being around the movers and shakers type of thing. And that's what I was going to say is I got a scholarship to go to Oberlin College in the Midwest, and I then, at that time, I got the opportunity to go to Paris with Miss Dunham, so I contacted the school and I asked could I go to Paris and then come back and go to school. And so they said, oh, yes, I could. But then when I got back, they told me, oh, no, there was a new administration or whatever, and they didn't honor that. So I ended up going to Hunter College, which was actually better for me because being in New York, I was able to go to school and then take time out to do a movie here and there, go back to school. And so that worked out perfectly, finally.
Wow, that's quite a life, especially at that point in time in your life just beginning. I mean, wow, I can't even...
I know. It was like so unbelievable. So unbelievable. And as I've often thought about it, the number of people, as a matter of fact, when my mom worked for Dr. King, they used to have big events for him all the time at different armories around the city. And I'll never forget one time, there was this big event with Harry Belafonte, Dorothy Dandridge, and all of these big people, Sidney Poitier and everybody. And Dr. King came over to me, a little girl, leaned over and asked me how was I doing and everything. And I was like so thrilled. I was like, oh my gosh, he's such a famous person, and he stopped to say hi to me and find out how I'm doing. And I was just a little girl. So he was a beautiful person.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah. And that's another reason why we ended up meeting a lot of these famous people, because my mom would take us to the receptions, and also we were the only kids there. And so people would gravitate to us, you know, come and shake our hands and what have you. And so that was fun. Even Lumumba, he was at a secret meeting at the ambassador's home from Liberia. And he was just about to leave, and somebody came to my mom and said, oh, Patrice Lumumba is here if you want to come and meet him. So they took us to the back, and he was getting into his limo. And I was an avid collector of autographs then. So I handed him my autograph book, and he didn't know what it was. And then the person with him explained. So he signed his name in my book. But while he was signing his name, my body became ice cold. And my mom said afterwards, oh, he'll be back in a few months. And I said, no, Mommy, he's going to be killed. And she said, what? What are you talking about? And I said, it's not my fault. While he was signing my book, my body just became ice cold, and I was told he's going to be killed.
Oh, my God.
Isn't that something? And the rest is history.
Wow. God, that's crazy. So, did you study acting in New York?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I studied with Win Handeman from the American Place Theater. He just recently died. And I had another private teacher named Ella Gerba, and she was a wonderful teacher also. And then I went to the HB Studios and studied there.
Yeah, that was
got a scholarship to go there.
Yeah, that must have been a magical time for acting in New York.
Oh, God, yes. Yeah, it was wonderful. And I did some plays, like I did Blues for Mr. Charlie at the Manhattan Theater Club. And I did a few plays at it's still there, La Mama Theater in the East Village. It was a famous theater of avant-garde plays. And as a matter of fact, Ellen Stewart, who again died several years ago, she took me on first she had it at the theater, a Cotton Club review, Cotton Club Gala, and then it was picked up to tour Europe. So we danced our way across Europe doing different dances from the Cotton Club. And in the real Cotton Club, I would have been way too dark to have performed there. So that was what was unique about our show, because we were of all complexions in the show and did the traditional old dances with the traditional music. So that was absolutely fabulous, as you can imagine. Plus, in the 70s, when I was modeling, there was a time I was one of the pioneer dark-skinned models of the 70s, because before that,
of course,
you were very light-skinned to even think of modeling.
Was there anybody in your acting classes that went on to become successful?
Yes, as a matter of fact, there was a young lady. Oh my gosh, I can't even think of her name right now, but she's very famous in the soaps, and I heard she never got an award, even though she's been there forever. And
Susan Lucci.
Really good. Do you know who I mean?
Susan Lucci.
Right, exactly. Yeah. She was in my class.
Wow, that's incredible.
And as a matter of fact, on the tour for the Cotton Club Gala, Ellen was also touring a trilogy, Greek trilogy, and Diane Lane was a little girl. She was with us for that trip.
Wow.
He's become famous.
Oh, yeah, because her mother was an actress.
Uh-huh.
Colleen Farrington, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And it was so fascinating because in part of the trilogy, the Greek trilogy, they had 2 boa constrictors. Mm-hmm. And so one time I volunteered to babysit them one weekend. You can imagine me in my hotel room with 2 boa constrictor snakes. And the housekeeper came in. And you can imagine the scream.
Oh, yeah.
So then I took them out, and it was funny because here I had never had any experience with snakes, and it was so wild. Because one, I was shocked as to how strong they are, and then I went outside with them, and I almost lost them because I put them on the grass, and of course, then they tried to get away and going in different directions, but somehow I survived the whole experience. But that was really hysterical.
Yeah, I don't know too much about boas though, but do they have venom in them?
No, but they constrict you, so you don't want to put it around your neck.
No,
not a good idea.
Not unless you're Alice Cooper.
Oh my God!
That's
funny?
Yeah, how did Beyond the Valley of the Dolls come to you?
Well, at that time, I was with the Agency for the Performing Arts, known as APA, and my agent got a script, a character description of Petronella Danford, and so it was like, oh my God! It was as if they had written this description for me. So I went. They flew me out to California, and I went in looking as I thought Pet would look. And as soon as Russ Myers saw me, he said, "There's Pet. Here she is." And it was very wonderful. I had a screen test, and they actually gave me drum lessons so that I could at least look as if I were really playing the drums. And it was very funny because after the film, for years, anytime I went to a club, the drummers would actually get up and offer to let me play a set. I tell them, oh no, it was just in the movies. I'm not a real drummer, but thanks for the compliment.
Yeah, I still can't believe Roger Ebert wrote this movie. I remember years ago, I read his review, and it had 0 stars in it. And I don't know if he genuinely didn't like the movie or he was just being self-deprecating because he wrote it.
Well, that's funny because, as a matter of fact, towards the end of his life, Roger became... we started corresponding with each other via email, and he actually flew me out to Champlain, Illinois, and he gave me a thumbs up award for my role in Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. So that was quite exciting for me.
Wow.
And it was funny because I was in my apartment in Manhattan, and I got a phone call, and the guy at the other end said, "Is this Marcia McBroom?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Is it the Marcia McBroom?" And I said, "Most definitely." And he said, "Well, I'm calling on behalf of Roger Ebert, and he wants to know if you and a guest would be willing to fly out because he wants to give you a thumbs up award for Beyond the Valley of the Dolls." And I was like, oh my goodness. So we had a fabulous week because he used to have this overlooked film festival that he would have out there, and we saw all kinds of my husband and I, Louis Small, flew out and had a fabulous week with him, and it was great. It was absolutely great.
Oh, was he still able to talk?
He would write everything because that's when he had his cancer of the salivary glands. I didn't even know that was humanly possible to get. But what was wonderful about Roger is he always kept his spirits up. He was always very inspiring.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's so sad.
And then finally he did end up getting some kind of little device where he could talk through this box. But he had a round-the-clock care, and his wife, Chaz, was really sweet, and it was very loving. And I got to meet, this big director, Werner. I'll never forget that. It was like, oh, my God, he's such, he does these incredible documentaries. And that was wonderful. The last day of the festival, he invited my husband and I in to meet and greet. So we met the head of the college and all of that. And it was wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And it was interesting because my husband, Louis Small, played piano for Richie Havens for 10 years. Yeah, and he had played with Al Cooper, and it was just amazing. And then I never dreamed that my little sisters, two of my sisters, would end up as incredible rock singers. Well, my sister Lorelei did the Steel Wheels tour with the Rolling Stones.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and then she and my sister Durga, the two of them sang with Pink Floyd and did a world tour with them. Durga actually did 3 world tours with them. And Lorelei now belongs to an Aussie Pink Floyd tribute band. So they go all around the world. Obviously, they're grounded now because of the virus. But they travel all over the world singing. And she's the only one in the Aussie Pink Floyd tribute band who actually played with the real Pink Floyd. So, of course, I got to meet the band and meet Mick Jagger and all of that. It's like, oh, my gosh, it's just always been fun and exciting in our lives.
Yeah. I could just imagine, yeah. How is working with Russ Meyer?
Well, Russ, to me, my description always of him was a big teddy bear. I remember he had these big hands, and he always had this, little devilish twinkle in his eyes. And his big joke with me was that I have the smallest breasts of any woman he's ever worked with. So he said, I picked you for other reasons than for your boobs. And he was always very funny, had a great sense of humor. And he was very much into making us look and feel as beautiful as possible. I always appreciated that, is that this whole getting into that whole concept of being the most beautiful, sensuous woman that one could feel one could be. And I'll never forget, we did a layout for Playboy magazine, and I was always involved in the Unitarian Universalist Church. So I told them that I'd only do a headshot. And I wrote on my release that they could only use the picture once for this particular article, because I said I didn't know what I'd do later in my life. And I said, little be it for me to end up with Playboy magazine trying to take any credit for anything I did. And thank God I did that, because they were asking me several times if I'd please do a centerfold. And I'm like, no, I don't want to be that exposed to the whole world. Thank you, but no thanks, I'm flattered. And now I have 2 sons and 4, soon to be 4 grandchildren. So I said, oh, Lord. And now with the internet, could you imagine? I ended up as a high school history teacher.
Yeah.
That's all I would have needed was my students to find me as a centerfold.
Yeah.
Playboy.
I mean, there's some people who end up in Playboy, and they've come out of it just fine.
Oh, yeah, like Dolly Reed Martin. She did it. She was Miss May of 1966, and she's still hanging strong.
Yeah.
And Cynthia Myers was also a Playboy playmate. So it was fun working with them.
Yeah.
And Dolly and I are still friends now. As a matter of fact, my husband and I go and spend time with her. First at her house in Malibu, and now she's moved. So we go and see her. Beautiful. And I knew Dick and Dan, because Rowan and Martin were also clients of APA.
Yeah.
These are the performing arts, so we used to hang out together.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And is it true?
And it was so funny. This is funny.
Mm-hmm.
After Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, I ended up doing Jesus Christ Superstar with Norman Jewison, and we ended up in Israel for 4.5 months. So after that, I was engaged with Carl Anderson, who played Judas in Superstar. So one time he took me to a party, and who was there but John Lennon? And this is when he had broken up with Yoko Ono, and he's sitting there. I went over to him and I said, "Oh, Mr. Lennon, I made a promise with myself that if I ever met you, I'd ask you to give me a kiss." So he kissed me on the cheek, and I said, "Now I don't want this to go to your head. It's just a promise that I made to myself that I had to keep."
Oh, he must have been a nice guy.
He was very sweet. He was with, again, everybody knows her name except me, the young woman he was dating when he broke up with Yoko for a while, May Lee or something. And, but back to Russ, as I said, he was a complete doll, although Dolly told me that he was very intimidating with her. Mm-hmm. But he was always very sweet with me. Very nice.
Oh, that's great. Didn't you give Pam Grier a part in the movie?
Yeah, believe it or not, she was also with APA, and we shared a house together. We were roommates in a house up in the Beverly Hills, and so I asked her if she'd like to come with me one day to the set, and so she did, and ended up in the party scene in the movie. And I've heard that she's been interviewed with other people, and she's done her memoir, and she always gives me the credit, and lets everybody know that it was thanks to me that she got, in the movie.
Yeah.
She was also very sweet. And that was funny, being her a roommate, because you can imagine I opened the door and it's like Wilt Chamberlain is there to take her out on a date. And I'm like, oh, my God, I never knew who would be at the door when I opened. That was funny.
Yeah.
And it is cute, too, because I always had one foot in showbiz and the other foot in academia. So that was the whole thing, that in between all of this, I'd go back and I was majoring in cultural anthropology at Hunter College. And it was funny because sometimes my teachers would even say, "I don't even know why you bother coming back. You're making more than we're making now." But in my family, it was like finishing college wasn't even a question. That was like, that's what you do. And so I said, I don't care how long it takes me. I want that piece of paper. And thank God I did that, because that's how I ended up becoming a high school teacher after I left the business.
Yeah, and I can't believe Strawberry Alarm Clock is in the movie.
Oh, yes, and they were also in at the festival that Roger had. So I got to meet them personally, because when we were on set, I didn't really have a chance to meet them. And we became friends for a while with the drummer from Strawberry Alarm Clock. So that was fun. And they performed also at the festival. So that was just absolutely wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah, I know that John Waters is a big fan of the movie, and that this movie has such a cult audience,
Mm-hmm. And what's funny, though, because when it first came out, people just didn't know how to accept it, if it were funny, if it were serious. And basically, as Russ described it to us, he said what they purposefully tried to do was to find every cliche you could find in the movies, and it was taken on the Sharon Tate murders, unfortunately, that grisly situation. But they really wanted it to be very campy, and sometimes we'd have arguments in the morning, like certain lines. We're like, "Oh, Russ, this is too ridiculous. We can't say this." And so he'd let us, improvise where we wanted to feel more comfortable. But that was the whole joke, that it was like the most cliche-ish thing of all times. And now the audiences today really appreciate the movie because now they know, yes, you're supposed to laugh. Yes, this is campy. And, now it's really come into its own. While when we went to the first premiere, we were laughing, but the rest of the audience was in shock. It was like, oh, my God, what the hell? What is this? And then when I look at it to think that it was X-rated, and then when I think about it, it was very progressive, the idea that we had an all-girls rock group and that it was an interracial rock group. People in today's world, that's like no big deal, and there's a lesbian love scene in there. But Russ explained to me that he was really tapping into the psyche of the American public. So anyone who did anything that was considered immoral or whatever, they had to die before the movie was over. And me, because I just transgressed a little bit, that's why I just got wounded in the movie. So there was a lot of undercover subtleties going on, and he was always laughing at these. And it's so funny when you think of what's going on in today's world with, like, especially people in certain political situations where everyone's trying to be so upright and all of this, but underneath it all, they're a bunch of dirty old men. And that's what Russ liked to ease in on, this whole hypocrisy of what's considered proper sexually and what's not, and how, you'd have somebody, even when we have the scene playing in the high school gymnasium, and you'd see the older guys lusting over this young, rock group.
Yeah.
It was really, really funny.
And then after that movie, you did a Western. I can't say the full title of it, The Legend of Blank Charlie.
Exactly, with Fred Williamson.
Yeah.
That was quite an experience. And do you know, I almost did not get that part because it was written for a mulatta. And I said, you mean to tell me, are you trying to tell me that I'm too dark to play a slave, the role of an enslaved woman in America? And that's when they said, yeah, we're going to change that. You have the part. The idea, could you imagine being too dark to be an enslaved African in America?
Yeah.
Yeah. I said, but now I've heard it all. Now I've heard it all.
Yeah. I met Fred Williamson 4 years ago. I was at my very first horror convention, and he was there. And he had this 8x10 of him in the cast of MASH. And he told me to name every person in the picture with him, and I did. And then I said,
"Wow!"
And then I said, "Can I get that picture for free?" And he was like, "No."
Well, that's funny too, because Dolly and I did the Chiller Theater thing a few years ago, and it was the same time where they had a reunion with Jesus Christ Superstar. And we didn't even know that we would be there at the same time. So it was so funny. Somebody came over to our table and they said, "Excuse me, Marcia, Jesus would like to speak to you."
Oh, boy. Blasphemy.
Of course, everyone started laughing. It just started so hysterical.
Yeah, those autograph shows are fun. I just hope they come back after this pandemic,
Yeah. It was really wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And seeing my cast again. And then they did a revamping of the film. What do you call that when they upgrade it?
Reboot.
Reboot. And Norman Jewison came down from Canada for it. We had a special showing for the cast in Manhattan, and it was so wonderful because here it is so many decades later, and he saw me, he said, "Oh, Marcia McBroom." And I was like, wow, this is so wonderful. And it was so cute because after the film, I actually ended up staying at his home in England for like a week with his daughter and his wife at the time. And it was so cute because his little daughter just got very attached to me. And so she invited me to come to their home in England. And I was like, you have to ask your parents. You can't just invite people to your house like that. So she asked them, and they said, oh, sure. So I ended up spending a week with them, and it was so much fun because I got to meet Alan Ladd Jr.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So that was... Oh, and then guess what? When we were doing Superstar, Gregory Peck came to see Norman Jewison. And so I have a picture with Gregory Peck, and he was always one of my idols. I always loved his work.
Me too.
And he was such a doll baby.
Me too. I reached out to his daughter. I wanted to interview her because she's an actress, and I made the stupid mistake of saying I wanted to talk about her father too, and she told me I'm so tired of talking about my father, so I'll pass.
Oh, that's terrible because I used to know Miss Hemingway. And she was the same thing in that she felt so insecure, she said, because of her dad. And it was very sad because she was a friend of another friend of mine. And she was thinking, she said she really felt she needed some therapy because she, felt very insecure about so many things. And at that time, I was married to a therapist, and she was just about thinking of getting, going to see him. But then I told him because she ended up killing herself shortly thereafter. So I said, maybe just as well that he never did see her, because I said that would have been horrible if he'd had a couple of sessions with her and then she committed suicide. But it's so sad because you just don't know that somebody is so near the edge like that. But I felt so bad because she was such a beautiful, beautiful young woman. And at that time, her sister was getting all of the play, Margot.
Yeah. Beautiful lady.
Yeah. But, it's so sad to actually sit and talk with somebody and to see how delicate she was, and yet everything was always about her father and living up to her father and wanting to know about her father. Do you see what I mean? And here she felt, oh my God, can I really fill these shoes? And can I really live up to everything everybody expects of me? And so I felt I was very, very upset when she committed suicide. Yeah.
How was working with D'Urville Martin on that movie?
Well, he was not very nice to me, and neither was Fred at the time, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
And because you know what? It was that whole macho baloney where, okay, we're in a movie together. You're supposed to be my girlfriend in the movie, so you're supposed to come and see me after work. And I'm like, hell no, I got paid to do a job, and that's what I'm doing. So what I would do with Fred was just to bust his chops. We had this, very passionate love scene in the barn, and I told them they had to put lamb's wool on me because I said I do not want any accidentally on purpose doing this scene with him. And it was a closed set because, of course, anytime there's some sexy thing going on, everybody wants to come and watch. And I said, no, it's a closed set. Then, in between takes, I just had them put a towel between us to sop up the perspiration. And people were shocked because the director even had to speak to Fred because he was being so mean to me. But when we did the scene, it was like very passionate. So everybody thought, oh, God, maybe something is going on behind the scenes. I just did that to bust his chops because here I was so... I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I was really young, and here I'm thinking, oh, God, I'm doing a movie, but then it was like, but there's no see me after, we break kind of thing. It was like, oh, no. And so I ended up just being very to myself when we were doing the film. But I thought it was so funny that the director even had to speak to Fred and say, what the hell's going on? But then, two, when we had this big passionate scene together, everybody believed every minute of it. It was like, oh, wow. And I know Fred was just dying that I made him. He had to lie there with me. And we had to get all into it. And I said, well, that's what acting is all about, friends. You know, it doesn't mean that we're doing anything after this.
Yeah. Did you see Dolomite Is My Name?
No.
Wesley Snipes plays D'Urville Martin to a T in that movie.
Really?
I think that if this movie had been released theatrically, he would have gotten an Academy Award nomination. He is so good at it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's a wild world, because when we were filming Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, they were doing Myra Breckenridge. And it's funny because I've really never heard anything about that since. But here we were all on the same lot together. And, that was a horrible thing that I always tell people. But the director of that movie, here we had our party, you know, the closing party, and he comes over to me and he says, oh, I've been watching you all this time and I'd really like to F you. And I'm trying to act very sophisticated and not shocked. And I was like, in my mind, I'm saying, oh my God, I can't believe these people. How could anybody be so crude and rude? And it was like, oh my God. But it was fun working with Cynthia Meyer, because coming from New York, I didn't really know how to drive at that time. So Cynthia would pick me up in the morning to take me to the set. And she was such a flirt, you would not believe it. And so we would be waiting for a light to change, and she'd start like throwing kisses at the guys in the car next to us, kind of thing, and then zoom off. She was quite
a character.
A character, yes. Very provocative, very funny, but very sweet.
The kind of people I like to hang out with.
Right.
I'm a total free spirit, and I like being surrounded by free spirits.
Well, that was the place to be. That was definitely the place to be, of the free spirits.
Yeah.
And if you notice in the movie, Pet is basically Miss Goody Two-Shoes. And as a matter of fact, that's how I ended up getting a part in Come Back Charleston Blue, because I played an extra in Cotton Comes to Harlem. Mm-hmm. And then Sam Goldwyn Jr. wanted to do the sequel. And so he wanted to keep the same basic people together. And he said to me personally, he said, you know, Marcia, you don't just want to be typecast as a Miss Goody Two-Shoes all the time. So in this movie, you're going to be a bad girl. So in Come Back Charleston Blue, I have different roles. I'm a model, but I'm also, you know, a drug dealer. But my husband said he was laughing because he was on tour with Richie Havens, and they get to the hotel. And in the movie, I'm supposedly tasting some cocaine. And he said, they should have shown you how to do it. So it looked like it was just a joke. And he called Richie, said, oh, Richie, turn on the TV quickly. Marcia is doing coke. Everyone knows I'm totally no drugs, no marijuana, nothing. And yet in the movie, here I am with the, don't bogart the joint and all of that. That was always an inside joke with everybody.
Yeah. Do you have any good stories about Willie Dynamite?
Willie Dynamite. Well, the one thing I just felt was funny was that Roscoe Brown, that he's ended up on Sesame Street.
Yeah. I know. I couldn't believe that he had a career in blaxploitation film before he was on there. It's so strange.
Exactly. But here again, another one. He was a total sweetie pie, wonderful to work with. And it was a wonderful experience being in the movie. The director was a wonderful guy, Gilbert Moses, but unfortunately he ended up dying of pancreatic cancer. Mm-hmm. But he was an incredible director, very gifted, Gilbert Moses.
Yeah.
It's sad that he didn't make it. Now, Bingo Long and the Traveling All-Stars.
That's a great movie.
Now, there again, my best scene in that movie ended up on the cutting room floor because it was really about the baseball team. And I had this wonderful scene with Billy D where we're walking behind the club and talking, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful scene. So wonderful that actually the crew applauded when it was over. And if you know anything about movies, it's not very often that the crew will actually applaud something because, it's part of the job. And then when it ended up on the cutting room floor, I was so upset. But the director, prepared me before I went in to see the movie. And he said, yeah, we tried to keep it in, but the movie was getting a bit long. And since it wasn't, absolutely essential that scene was in, it had to go. And I was like, oh, how horrible.
Yeah, the Bingo Long Traveling All-Stars and Motor Kings, that's a great movie.
Mm-hmm. It's a wonderful movie. And yeah, it's funny because people don't realize when you're shooting a movie, of course, it's not in sequence. So, for example, I never got to meet Richard Pryor, for example. Do you see what I mean? So it's done in segments. I never got to meet him. And I was even shocked because I didn't realize that Pam ended up dating him for a few years. And until I heard her being interviewed at one point. Mm-hmm. But I did get to meet James Earl Jones, and he's like an actor's actor. There's certain actors that I just love, that I feel they're actors. For example, I had this great scene. You won't believe this. I wanted to hear Miles Davis perform because I never heard him perform live. And so here it is. I decide, okay, I'm going to get dressed. I'm going to go to this club to hear Miles Davis. I get to the club, and they said, oh, my goodness, he cut his lip the night before, so he's not going to be playing tonight. And I'm like, oh, my gosh, here I am at a club by myself. And I'm sitting at the bar. And it was funny because who was at the bar but Denzel Washington? And there were all these guys, and they see this young woman by herself at the bar, and you could just feel like Barracuda is about to come in for the attack. And all of a sudden, Denzel said, oh, this is my wife. And he saves me from these men. It was so funny. So we had a drink together, and then a week later, I was selling things in front of the Grant's Tomb. We had this jazz festival, and people sell, and I had a friend who sells items, African things, and he let me have part of his table. And so I'm selling, and this is when Denzel was doing Malcolm X. Mm-hmm. So here he was walking with his Malcolm X cap, but nobody recognized him because he's very low-keyed. And he came to my table, and I said to him, oh, do you remember me? I'm your wife. And he looked, he laughed, and it was so sweet. It was so sweet. So those are my two Denzel stories. Oh. But again, what a sweetie pie. What a sweetie pie. And it's unfortunate because I do have, I have a not-for-profit organization called For Children's Sake. Mm-hmm. And, for example, James Baldwin wanted to work with me with it, but then he died. And sometimes things happen where you meet people and they want to be helpful, but then, they are taken away. But yeah. I did meet Danny Glover in Zimbabwe because I took some students. I had a wonderful citywide contest of an apartheid awareness contest, and the 3 winners were getting a free trip to Zimbabwe. And so here we were in Zimbabwe, and who was there on his vacation but Danny Glover and his wife, his daughter, and her godfather. And so we got to meet him, and we were going through, I was on the board of the New York Committee for UNICEF at the time, and so we were going to see a refugee camp, and Danny wanted to come with us. And so UNICEF said, no, they're sorry he couldn't come because of the insurance issue. Mm-hmm. But they did tell him that he could follow us in his own car if he wanted to. So here it is. We're in our vehicle, and he was behind with his wife and daughter and the godfather. And so then we made a pit stop, and then we're driving along, and then our driver looks in his rearview mirror, and he says, oh, my God, I don't see Danny anymore. So we went back, and it turned out that as they were coming back onto the road, their car flipped over. And here it was, the wife was there standing. Thank God no bones were broken or anything, because here we are in the middle of nowhere, no first aid kit or anything. Wow. And his car is upside down with the wheels still spinning. And his daughter said to me that she just yelled out, because it turned out that Danny's mother had died to the very day the year before in a car crash. And so the daughter said, she just said, save us, Grandma, save us. And she said she just felt like a hand just pulled her out of the car.
Wow.
Yep. So they had to get into our vehicle now because his was incapacitated. And so we went to the refugee camp together. But it was unfortunate because Daddy took all this film, but then when I asked him about it, then he said, oh, my God, he had the wrong setting on his camera, so he didn't get anything. That was a bummer. Yeah, but he let me use his name on my letterhead for my organization for children's sake. So we've been in touch I haven't been in touch with him for a long time, but now we have another mutual friend named Jules Allen, who's an incredible photographer. And so he's a friend of Danny's, so I could still have access again.
Yeah. So what made you give up acting and become a teacher?
You won't believe this. You will not believe this. But my mom, who is always very much into going back and forth to Africa and different projects, and she had a travel agency. And as a matter of fact, my sister and I used to go as tour leaders, and we'd go to Morocco and all these exciting places with groups, and then we'd meet up with the tour leader over on the other side. So anyway, my mom goes to Nigeria. They have a military coup. And I said, Mother, there's been a military coup in Nigeria. Get on the next plane and get yourself home. And she's laughing. I'm not doing anything. Why would anybody bother me? So next thing we know, that was the last we heard from my mother in 13 months. She was arrested because they said anybody who was there, she must have been, they thought she was working for the CIA. And they put her in a maximum security prison. And so I had to drop my whole life and try to save my mom, of course. And after that, that was just so debilitating, as you could imagine, going through the trauma and drama of getting her home alive. And the U.S. government was of very little help until I was able to get the help of like Daniel Patrick Moynihan and Bill Bradley of New Jersey. So he was a friend of my then husband, and so the two of them really went to bat for me to get my mom home. And Amnesty International also helped because it was amazing. We didn't even know where she was or if she was still alive. And finally, one woman got out by just sheer chance. And the women who were still being held, and they would just pick everybody up, and they were laughing. They said, oh, you Americans are so funny. You think you need a reason to be arrested. Could you imagine?
Yeah.
And in a maximum security prison. And the horror stories about that were just unbelievable. So, as I said, after getting her home in one piece, I was so through because, you can't think of being glamorous and getting dressed to go for auditions or anything when my mom's life was on the line. So then I ended up getting a fellowship to James Madison Fellowship to get a master's degree. As a matter of fact, before my mom got put in the prison, I had already gone through half of my credits to get a master's degree at NYU. But then once I went back, they said, oh, there was too much of a lapse between when I started and that, so I lost those 18 credits and had to start from scratch. But thank God I got a James Madison Fellowship because I did want to be a social studies teacher because I love history. Yeah. So they paid for me to go and get my master's. And then I've ended up now, I'm in the Hall of Fame at my alma mater of Hunter College.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's exciting because I have 3 grandchildren with another one on the way. And I can't wait till they're older that I can show them there's Grandma's name on the wall.
Wow, you've been so lucky.
Yeah, it's been a very magical kind of life. As a matter of fact, I even got to meet Mother Teresa, for example. Mm-hmm. I used to be a volunteer for UNICEF, and I ended up on the board of the New York Metropolitan Committee for UNICEF, and I designed a breastfeeding poster for them, and because they were promoting breastfeeding, because it was so obnoxious that Nestle's was promoting infant formula around the world, and what they would do is send people who were dressed as nurses into these various hospitals around the world, give the mothers so much free formula, and it was just enough so that by the time the formula ran out, breast milk would be gone. And so now they had to feed the baby the formula. But because they didn't have the money, they would dilute it with water, and then babies were dying. So I was furious about that. So at this time, I had a name in Nigeria from a commercial I did for Lux Soap. So I decided, Susie Martins was my name in Nigeria. So I said, I want to do a breastfeeding commercial and show people that even Susie Martins, who's supposed to be living this glamorous life and being slid around in Lamborghinis and stuff, that she's breastfeeding, so they should breastfeed too. So I called the UNICEF and I said to them, I have this idea. And then they called me back. They said, oh, my God, because they didn't know about Susie Martins, my persona in Nigeria. They said, oh, my God, our field office was ecstatic when we told them that you wanted to do a breastfeeding poster. So I did it in my home, and it was interesting because I had a friend who was the makeup artist for The Wiz. So he came and did the makeup, and I had another friend Tom Jackson, who did the photograph. And I did it with flowers in the background, and I had on some jewelry, because I wanted, even if a woman could not read, that she would see from the photo that I was an upscale woman of means, and I was breastfeeding my baby. But it was funny because my own children are light-skinned, so I had to actually find a breastfeeding baby who was my complexion. And he's looking at me with the look of love in his eyes, and it was so funny because his mother said, look how quickly we're replaced. And I said, yes, our breasts will travel.
That's awesome.
And so anyway, I donated the poster to UNICEF. They ended up sending it all around the world. It ended up on the cover of West Africa magazine. I ended up getting invited out to California to speak at an international conference for La Leche League. And it was funny because Denny Moore was there too, but unfortunately she was like at the other end of the stage, so I never really got to meet her in person. I just saw her there on the panel where I was. But it was... I ended up then getting a letter from the New York State Department of Health asking me if they could put the posters in all the clinics in New York State. And some some of them, believe it or not, are still up, because one of my daughter-in-laws said she went to Columbia Presbyterian Hospital, and they still had my poster up, and she's like, "Oh my God, there's my mother-in-law." And some of my students would tell me they'd go to a WIC clinic or something, and they'd say, "Oh my God, there's my teacher." So it took on a life of its own. It was really, I'm very, very proud of that.
Yeah.
Because I wanted women to know it's a fabulous thing that we can breastfeed our children, because I said this brings out your goddess energy. And as opposed to making it feel like, oh, this is something we have to do, it's like, no, this is fabulous. And I once heard a story that Gloria Vanderbilt was questioned because she was nursing her child, and she said, what would be better for a Vanderbilt child than Vanderbilt milk?
Yeah.
Right. So you want, and that's what, on the poster I said, my baby deserves the best. That's why I breastfeed longer, because breastfed babies are stronger, happier, and healthier. Just remember, breast is best. Susie Martin's. But then on the poster for New York State, I used my own name, Marcia McBroom. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so that was very, very exciting.
So what do you do?
And then I also did a lot of record covers. So I did like the Black Angel for Freddie Hubbard, and I did 2 covers for Van McCoy, including Disco Baby, which has the famous Do the Hustle.
Yeah.
On that one. And I did a cover for Lalo Schifrin called The Black Widow, and I did a cover for the Fatback Band, and 2 covers for the Stylistics, and some other album covers. And then I did a lot of magazine covers. As I said, there was a magazine called After Dark. I did a cover for them, and Encore magazine. I think I mentioned my first cover was for a magazine called Evergreen. Then I did one for a magazine called Unique New York, and African Commentary, and I did an Essence cover. So that was also fun. And I used to do a lot of commercials, and it's funny because I had a lot of different looks I could do. And so one time I actually had 7 commercials running at the same time, but they all had different looks, but that was fun to do. And in the subway in New York, people would come up to me all the time, "Oh, didn't I meet you last Friday at so-and-so's party?" And I'm like, no, I said I do TV commercials. So everyone thought that they knew me, because it's so that you don't realize how personal TV is. You're right in your quiet of your home, and you see this person there. And so that was funny for a long time. People would always come up to me thinking they knew me from someplace, somebody's home or whatever. And no, it's the commercial. So that was interesting. But it was funny because one time I had to do a modeling job in an area in the Bronx, and it was in the window of, we had this famous department store called Alexander's. And I'll never forget this, because a mother came to me afterwards with her little child who was about 5 years old, and she said, "Oh, my son wanted to meet you because he was so excited to see an African American woman in the show, in the modeling show, and he wanted to come and meet you in person." And I realized, oh my God, this is such an important thing to be a role model for our children, so that they can always feel proud seeing you. So I made a promise to myself that I'd never do anything or accept something that I wouldn't feel good about. And even though, I did play, Woman of the Night a couple of times in 2 movies, but I did that because I thought the director was a very good director. Mm-hmm. There were other parts that I turned down because I felt, oh, no, this is just too scandalous. Yeah. Be a part of something like that. So that was something that I liked. And my whole thing was always, too, of making money, doing, having a career, but also always working to help others, because as a child going to Africa, for example, and seeing women and girls spending so much time just fetching a bucket of water. That really, really got to me as a little girl, because I was like, oh my God, how much our lives we take for granted. Mm-hmm. And here other people are under such duress, and then going to that refugee camp, for example, and seeing how even though they were in a refugee camp, people were still trying to be very creative. And, of course, they had things they wanted to sell to us because we were visiting the camp. And I ended up going as a Goodwill ambassador for UNICEF to Burkina Faso, for example, and Ivory Coast, because I organized a benefit for UNICEF in Harlem at City College when there was the Ethiopian famine. And it wasn't on the news here. And I said, oh, my God, 1 million people have died of famine, and it doesn't even make the 6 o'clock news. This is outrageous. So anyway, we had the benefit. And then the next day, the BBC did break the story. So a lot of people thought it was, because of my little benefit, that suddenly this had hit the news. But the point was, President Thomas Sankara of Burkina Faso happened to have been in New York to speak at the UN. And he wanted to meet me because he said, anybody who's a friend of Africa, I want to meet them. And so I met with him, and I told him, that I was an actress and what have you. And he said, well, I want to invite you to Burkina Faso. I'm going to ask UNICEF to send you to Burkina so you could see what I'm doing with my country. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah. But next thing I know, I got a letter from UNICEF. President Thomas Sankara wants you to come to Burkina Faso. And I was like, oh, my God, he was serious. So I went, and they have a film festival there every other year called FESPACO. And so I went, and it was amazing. So I ended up going back there with some students. Mm-hmm. And I'm so sorry I didn't take any film or anything, but he had a meeting with my students for an hour. Mm-hmm. And to get their opinion of, what they learned being there in the country. And he had us each plant a tree. And it was so funny because the soil was so hard. But the soldiers who were with us were ready to dig the holes for us. And I said, no, we need this experience. And we had calluses on our hands. But it was cute because Sankara said to the kids, now you'll know when you grow up that you help with the reforestation of Africa. And I thought that was so wonderful of him. And he would do incredible things because he was very conscious of how hard women in Africa, for example, have to work. So he had one day where he had a role reversal, where the men were supposed to do what their wives had to do, and the wives could do what the men had to do. And everyone thought he was totally crazy, but they went along with it. And then the men really started appreciating much more of, what their wives had to go through.
Yeah.
But Sankara said to me, he said, I know I'm most likely going to end up getting assassinated. And he said, but I'm going to still do whatever I can do. And hopefully some things they'll have to keep keep running after I'm killed. And he says, I'm just living day by day. And sure enough, he ended up getting assassinated.
Wow.
Yeah, but that was very devastating.
Hey, Marcia, before I get to my next interview, I have this secret silly game that I like to indulge my guests in.
Okay.
And how this works is I ask you the question, you answer it, and then you ask me the exact same question, and I answer it. It's silly slumber party questions.
Okay.
Marcia, are you ticklish?
Yes, I am ticklish. Tommy, are you ticklish?
Yes, I'm very ticklish.
As a matter of fact, I have my little grandson get tickled every night when my son calls me, because I tell him, I'm going to hear you laugh, so Daddy has to tickle you. Papa has to tickle you. And so my son tickles him so I could hear him laugh.
Yeah. Is your belly button an innie or an outie?
An innie. It used to be an outie, but in the Caribbean, if you have an outie, they put a coin on you and strap you up until it goes in.
Huh. That's interesting, because I have an outie.
Uh-huh. Yeah, a lot of kids in Africa have outies.
Mm-hmm. What color are your toenails painted?
When they're painted red.
Nice.
What color are your toenails painted?
Right now, they're not painted. I need to come up with something good for summertime. Last time they were purple with sparkles.
Oh.
What would you say is your best personality trait?
My best personality trait is that I'm a Leo, so I'm very generous, very compassionate, and I like to be a peacemaker. So what is your best personality trait?
My sense of empathy and the fact that I have no filter.
Uh-huh. That's great.
Mm-hmm. And then my favorite question, is there a stinky smell that just makes you gag?
Is there a stinky smell that just makes me gag? Yeah, the stinky smell of ignorance really makes me gag. What's a stinky smell that makes you gag?
That is the best answer I've ever had for that question. Either farts or feet.
Okay.
Whenever I say that to someone who has kids, it doesn't affect them one way or another.
I know, but you know what's funny? When you breastfeed a baby, they have wonderful poops. They don't start stinking until they start eating regular food.
Yeah. I know. I don't even want to think about that, though. Well, Marcia, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for coming on and telling these amazing stories. You have lived an incredible, blessed life.
Thank you so much, and thank you for wanting to get these thoughts out there in the universe, you know? Hopefully somebody will hear something that might help them or mean something to them.
Yes, and I will get in touch with Apache as soon as possible.
Okay, and I will call Dolly and see, you know, if we can get her.
Oh yeah, that would be great.
She might do it since I did it.
Yeah, that would be great. Okay, you have yourself a great day over there, and please stay safe in this crazy time.
Thank you, and stay blessed in this crazy time.
I will.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, honey. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, there you have it. Marcia McBroom. Ain't she a sweetheart? Oh, what a great lady and a fantastic life she's led. That is just wonderful. If you like this video, everyone, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Add me as a friend on Facebook. Join my Tommy Kovac comedian page on Facebook. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram and all that fun stuff. Well, that's all the time we have this week on Splat from the Past. Until next time, this is Tommy Throwback Kovac saying, there's no shame in living in the past, because the present sucks. Later, dudes.